The last time my son called me by my old nickname, he was 9 years old and we were fishing off the dock at my brother's place in Muskoka. He'd called me Grizzly back then. Not Dad, not Papa, Grizzly. It started because of a bedtime story I used to tell him, something I made up on the spot one night when he was 4 and couldn't sleep, about a bear who lived in the northern woods and protected his family from the things that came too close in the dark. He liked the story so much he told it back to me the next night with different details, and somewhere in that retelling, the bear became me and the name stuck. By the time he was 12, he'd outgrown it the way kids outgrow everything that once felt permanent. He became the kind of teenager who called me by my first name sometimes, half joking, and then just Dad like everyone else. That was 23 years ago. He said it in the middle of clearing the dinner plates on a Sunday evening in October. We were at my house in Waterloo, the 4 of us, me, my wife, my son, and the man he'd brought to meet us for the first time. My son's name is Owen, and he is 32 years old, and he said thanks Grizzly when I handed him the serving dish from the roast, so casually that the man sitting across from him didn't even look up. I kept my face completely still. I said, "You're welcome," and I walked back to the kitchen counter and stood there for a moment with my back to the table. My body went very quiet, the particular kind of quiet I hadn't felt since I'd left the job. My name is Len Horvath. I spent 22 years with the Ontario Securities Commission, first as an investigator in the enforcement branch, and later as a senior analyst reviewing complaint files and coordinating with the RCMP on cases that crossed into criminal territory. When I retired at 61, it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because my wife Shirley had been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's, and I wanted to be home. I don't regret that decision. But 22 years of reading people for a living doesn't switch off the way a light does. You retire from the job. The habits don't retire from you. The man my son had brought to dinner was named Philippe Audet. He was 41 years old, originally from Quebec City, now living in Kitchener. He worked, he had said over the soup course, in private wealth coordination, a phrase I had heard before, a phrase that means something when someone with credentials uses it and means something else entirely when someone without them does. He was easy to talk to. He asked Shirley about her garden with what seemed like genuine interest. He laughed at the right moments. He had strong opinions about hockey that he stated without being aggressive about them, which is a skill more people should have. He was, in every visible way, exactly what you would want for your recently separated 32-year-old son who had spent the better part of 2 years putting himself back together after a relationship that had cost him more than he'd expected. Owen's separation had been finalized 8 months ago. He and his partner had owned a condo together in Cambridge, and when everything was settled and the equity divided and the accounts separated, Owen had walked away with his car, his savings, and just over $94,000 in combined assets, a TFSA he'd been contributing to since his mid-20s, and a small inheritance from his grandmother that he'd never touched. He had told me about it one evening in the spring, sitting at my kitchen table the way he used to sit when he was a teenager with something on his mind. He was proud of it. He had reason to be. Philippe had entered the picture 3 months after the separation was final. They'd met at a climbing gym in Kitchener, where Owen had started going on weekends to fill the time that the relationship used to occupy. Philippe was charming and attentive and remembered small things. He brought coffee to Owen's apartment on the mornings. Owen had early shifts at the engineering firm where he works. He texted back quickly. He made Owen feel like someone worth paying attention to, and Owen hadn't felt that way in a while. I had heard about Philippe before this dinner. I had been glad Owen had found someone. And then he called me Grizzly, and I remembered what I know about people who are very easy to like. After dinner, Shirley suggested she and Philippe take their tea in the sitting room to look at the photograph he'd been organizing from our trip to the Maritimes last summer. She knows my face the way you can only know someone's face after 34 years of marriage. She had seen something change behind my eyes, and she moved Philippe out of the room without making anything of it. Owen sat across from me at the kitchen table. He was holding his mug with both hands. He looked tired in a way that wasn't just the drive from Kitchener. "How long?" I asked him. He looked up. "How long what? How long have you been sitting with something that doesn't feel right?" He let out a breath. It was a long one. "A few weeks. Maybe more. Tell me." He set the mug down and rubbed the back of his neck. Philippe had started talking to him, he said, about 6 weeks ago. Not about anything alarming at first. Just general conversation about money, about how the traditional financial advice industry was built around fees, not outcomes, about how most people with real assets were being underserved by the products available to retail investors. He had framed it as something he'd learned the hard way. He spoke about it the way someone speaks about things they want you to understand, not things they want to sell you. Then, about 3 weeks ago, he had mentioned a fund. A private real estate income trust, he called it, structured specifically for investors who weren't being served by public markets. He said he knew the people behind it personally. He said he himself had put $70,000 in 2 years ago and was averaging 14% annually, which he presented as modest, which was part of what made it feel credible. He wasn't promising the moon. He was promising something reasonable. The fund was called Northgate Capital Income Partners, registered in Alberta, he said. Though the investment opportunity was available nationally, the minimum entry was $25,000. The preferred allocation, better projected distributions, quarterly instead of annual, was available to investors committing $80,000 or more. That number, $80,000, just under Owen's total. There was a window closing, Philippe had said. The current intake period ended at the end of the month, 14 days from now. Did he put anything in writing? Owen pulled out his phone. He emailed me a summary document last week. Have you responded? I told him I was thinking about it. Good. I didn't reach for the phone yet. Has he asked specifically about your numbers? The TFSA, the inheritance? Owen was quiet for a moment. I told him. Early on, when I was talking about the separation, I wasn't thinking about it as information. I was just talking. How specific? I said it was around 100,000 total. He closed his eyes briefly. I said I hadn't touched the inheritance because it felt like it should mean something. From the sitting room, I could hear Philippe's voice, warm, unhurried, asking Shirley something about Nova Scotia. I held my hand out for the phone. Owen unlocked it and slid it across. The summary document for Northgate Capital Income Partners was 11 pages. The formatting was clean and professional. The cover listed a Calgary address and a logo that looked like something a real firm would use. The performance section showed consistent annual distributions of 12 to 16% over 5 years, with no auditing firm credited. There was a section describing something called the Northgate Income Security Reserve, characterized as a buffer fund that would protect investor distributions in the event of portfolio underperformance. The reserve was described in careful language that implied protection without specifying what the protection mechanism actually was or who administered it. There was no reference to any external audit or regulatory filing. The deadline for the current intake period was printed in bold near the end of the document. I need to take this home tonight, I said. Owen nodded. You did the right thing, I said. Tonight. What you did. He looked at the table. I didn't plan it. I don't even know why I said it. I was just sitting there and I needed you to look at me differently. He paused. I haven't called you that since I was a kid. I know. I heard it. He looked up. What do I do? Let me look at this first. Don't respond to him tonight. He said he wouldn't. I believed him. After they left, Shirley stood at the kitchen counter and didn't say anything for a while. He was very pleasant, she said. He is. That's not the issue. How bad is it? I told her about the document, about the 80,000 threshold, about the 14-day window. She dried her hands on the dish towel and turned around and looked at me the way she does when she already knows the answer and wishes she didn't. All right, she said. What do we do first? Sat at the kitchen table until nearly 2 in the morning. Northgate Capital Income Partners. I started with CDAR, the System for Electronic Document Analysis and Retrieval, which is where any reporting issuer or exempt market dealer in Canada is required to file. Nothing under that name. I checked the Alberta Securities Commission's registry directly. No registered exempt market dealer, no registered investment fund manager operating under that name, no record of a prospectus or offering memorandum filed with any provincial securities regulator. I pulled the Calgary address. It was a business services center on 8th Avenue, the kind of office that rents mailboxes and provides a suite number that looks, on paper, like a physical office. I had seen this exact structure dozens of times. The suite number costs less than $100 a month. The address looks real until you look at it. I examined the performance history more carefully. 5 years of returns cited with no source, no named auditor, no general partner disclosure. Any legitimate exempt market product in Canada operating under the accredited investor exemption would have a filed offering memorandum. There was nothing. There was a logo and a reserve fund that didn't exist and a deadline designed to prevent thinking. I searched Philippe Audate's name in the provincial registries. He was not registered as an advisor or dealing representative in Ontario, Alberta, or Quebec. He was not registered with the MFDA, or any other recognized self-regulatory organization. In Canada, recommending a specific investment to a specific person for compensation, or even with reasonable expectation of benefit, requires registration. He had none. I called a former colleague of mine in the morning. Her name is Beverly Wachowski, and she spent 15 years with the OSC before moving to the Investment Industry Regulatory Organization as a senior investigator. We had worked 11 cases together over the years, none of them simple. She was careful and thorough and owed me nothing, and she picked up on the second ring. I gave her Philippe's name and the fund name and the Calgary address. "Give me until this afternoon," she said. While I was waiting, I called a forensic accountant I had worked with on 4 cases during my time at the OSC. His name is Sanjay Mehta, and he was currently running an independent practice in Toronto. I read him the relevant sections of the document over the phone: the income security reserve language, the distribution structure, the asset-backed characterization of the underlying holdings. He stopped me when I got to the reserve section. "Read that part again." I did. "That's AIR," he said. Named AIR. The language implies there's a funded mechanism protecting investor distributions, but there's no capitalization requirement stated, no administrator named, no regulatory body with oversight. If someone invested and the fund said the reserve was insufficient, there's no mechanism for the investor to challenge it. It's designed to sound protective. It commits to nothing. I told him Owen was 14 days from a deadline. "He came to you first," Sanjay said. "That matters more than you might think." Beverly called me at 2:15. "Philippe Audet is real," she said, which meant what I expected it to mean. He was 41, she confirmed, originally from Lévis. He had worked for a financial services company in Mississauga for 3 years and left under circumstances that generated a complaint. A man 67 years old, recently retired from a career with the city of Hamilton. He had moved $48,000 into an unregistered private fund at Philippe's recommendation. The fund had no registration with the OSC or any other provincial securities commission. The man lost the money. He had not come forward initially. His daughter had eventually contacted the OSC 6 months later, after her father became too distressed to manage the situation himself. I closed my eyes. Was there a criminal referral? The file was referred to the RCMP. It's still open. A pause. There are complications on the evidentiary side. The man transferred the money willingly. Philippe's name doesn't appear on any fund documents. He's careful about that. He's insulated. The person whose name appears on the Northgate registration in Alberta, I checked this morning, is a woman who surrendered her provincial ID in British Columbia 18 months ago. We're still working on what that means, but it doesn't look like voluntary cooperation. Confirmed losses tied to Philippe Audet across 2 provinces so far, 4 people. Total losses approximately $320,000. But Beverly thought there were more. He'd been operating for at least 3 years. I sat with that for a while. 3 years, a retired man in Hamilton who'd been too distressed to come forward, and now Owen's savings, the inheritance he hadn't touched because it felt like it should mean something. Sitting inside a 14-day window while Philippe asked Shirley about her photographs from Nova Scotia. I drove to Owen's apartment in Kitchener that afternoon. He met me at the door. I could see in his face that he'd been waiting, the particular tension of someone who already half knows what they're about to hear and is hoping to be wrong. We sat at his kitchen table, and I told him everything. The CDAR search, the unregistered addresses, Sanjay's analysis of the reserve language, the retired man in Hamilton, Beverly's confirmation that Northgate had no legal standing anywhere in Canada as a registered investment vehicle, and the fact that the person whose name appeared on the Alberta registration was almost certainly not someone with any genuine connection to the fund, which meant Philippe was the recruiter for a structure specifically built to create distance between the pitch and the paper. Owen was very still through all of it. He told me he wanted to help me build something real, he said. Not angry, not crying. The quiet of someone reading a letter again and understanding what the words actually mean. He used that phrase, build something real, because I'd told him that was what the last 2 years had cost me, that feeling. I know. 2 weeks ago I nearly said yes. He looked at the window. Outside it was gray and starting to rain, the particular flat Ontario rain of October. I was actually sitting there thinking, why am I hesitating? This is someone who knows me. This is someone I trust. He turned back to me. I talked myself into being embarrassed about the hesitation. But you didn't say yes, no, and at dinner you used the signal. He looked at me. I didn't plan it. I was just sitting there and something, I don't know. I needed you to see me from the outside. I needed you to see it the way you would have seen it when I was a kid and something was wrong at school and I didn't know how to say it. He stopped for a moment. I haven't called you that since I was 9. I know, I heard it. He took a breath. What do I need to do? I explained it the way I used to explain an undercover step to someone who'd never done it before but was steadier than they thought. He needed to meet Philippe one more time. He needed to let Philippe complete the pitch, the full structure, the wire instructions, the account details, the deadline, the return projections. He needed to record it. In Ontario, recording a conversation you are a party to is legal without disclosure to the other party. His phone, his voice, his own conversation, he needed to seem like a man who had made up his mind and was ready to act. Owen, can you do this? He looked at me the way he had when he was 12, and I told him he could take the canoe out alone if he was willing to be genuinely careful about the conditions. He thinks he knows who I am, Owen said. He thinks I'm someone who's been through something hard and wants to believe the next thing will be better. A pause. I can sit across from him and let him think that for one afternoon. He texted Philippe that evening. Kept his tone warm, a little eager, said he'd been thinking seriously, and had a few final questions before he committed. Philippe responded within 8 minutes. He suggested coffee the following Saturday, somewhere Owen felt comfortable, somewhere familiar, always calibrating. I drove to Owen's apartment Saturday morning and sat with him at his kitchen table and walked him through the mechanics. Phone in the breast pocket of his jacket, voice memo running before he walked through the door. Let Philippe lead. Don't rush toward the financial details. Ask clarifying questions with neutral curiosity. So when would the wire need to go through? And how do the quarterly distributions actually get processed? If there was silence, let it sit. People who are selling something fill silence, especially patient people, especially people who have been at this for 3 years and know exactly how long to wait. Don't be too eager, I told him, but be close. Be a man who has already decided and just needs to say it out loud. I know what that looks like, he said. I've been practicing it for 6 weeks without knowing that's what I was doing. I drove home and Shirley and I sat in the living room. She made tea. We didn't talk much. The television was on and neither of us watched it. Some kinds of waiting are too full for conversation. Owen texted at 4:11. Done. Calling you now. His voice on the phone was steady, but I could hear the particular quality of someone whose adrenaline had just finished its work on a body that had been holding itself carefully for 2 hours. Philippe had been thorough. He'd walked Owen through the entire structure of Northgate Capital Income Partners, the projected distributions, 18 to 22% annually, numbers so far above any credible exempt market benchmark that they function as a confession to anyone who knows what those numbers mean. The intake deadline, now 11 days away. The preferred allocation for investors committing over $80,000. The wire instructions. A specific account at a credit union in Alberta. He said the fund operated outside the traditional banking system for efficiency reasons, Owen told me. He said capital would be fully deployed within 4 business days of receipt. 4 business days. I knew what that meant. 4 business days was more than enough time to move money through enough layers to make recovery extremely difficult. That was not a feature of the investment. That was an exit timeline dressed up as a process detail. He shook my hand when we said goodbye, Owen said. He said he was glad Owen was starting to trust good things again. Owen's voice went flat when he said that last part. I told him he had done exactly right. Then I called Beverly. She listened to the recording that evening and called me at 8 the next morning. It's enough, she said. We're coordinating with the RCMP and the Alberta Securities Commission. Len, she paused. There's more than I told you. The account in Alberta has had significant movement. We're now looking at total confirmed losses closer to $500,000 across 5 provinces. There are victims we haven't fully identified yet. Some of them transferred money and never reported it. Some of them are still waiting to see if the quarterly distribution arrives. $500,000. People who had saved carefully and were starting over and wanted to believe in something. People who were too ashamed to come forward. People who had nobody at their kitchen table, who had spent 22 years learning to recognize exactly what had happened to them. Philippe Audet was arrested at his apartment in Kitchener on a Thursday morning. Owen texted me while it was happening. He was standing in the parking lot of his office building, still in his coat, hand pressed flat against his sternum the way he used to press his hand against his chest when he was nervous as a kid. Dad. Beverly just confirmed. It's happening right now. I texted back. Go inside, get some water. You did that. The investigation that followed established that Philippe had been running variations of the same structure for at least 4 years across Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia. Northgate Capital Income Partners was one of 2 fraudulent vehicles in active use at the time of his arrest. The woman whose name appeared on the Alberta registration was located in Vancouver. Her identity had been used without her knowledge, acquired through a data breach 2 years prior. Philippe had specifically chosen identities of real people with clean regulatory histories to put on the paperwork, creating a layer between himself and the documents that had made him difficult to reach through the paper trail alone. Across all confirmed victims, 9 people, ranging in age from 31 to 73, losses exceeded $580,000. Several of them had not come forward on their own. Several of them still haven't said anything publicly, because the thing about this kind of fraud is that it works by making people feel like they should have known better. It works by attaching itself to something real, real attention, real time, real warmth, and leaving the victim holding the question of how they couldn't see what was underneath all of that. Owen was the only person Philippe had targeted who had not lost $1. 6 weeks later, he came for dinner. Just the 3 of us. Shirley made her brisket, the one that takes most of the day and makes the whole house smell the way houses are supposed to smell on Sunday afternoons in the fall. We sat at the same table where 5 months of careful, patient work had come within 2 weeks of paying off for someone who'd done this before and knew exactly how long to wait, and we were just 3 people eating dinner. Owen was different that evening. Not the stretched thin different of the weeks before. Something settled, something that had room in it. He helped clear the dishes without being asked. He sat down across from me afterward with his coffee and didn't say anything for a while, and that was fine. I keep going back to the same thought, he said eventually. What thought? He picked the moment. He didn't just meet me at the climbing gym and like me. He found me at a specific point. Separation just done. Assets just settled. Emotionally trying to prove to myself that I wasn't going to be suspicious of everything forever. He wrapped his hands around the mug. He picked the version of me that most wanted to believe the next thing would be good. Yes, that's the part I keep sitting with. I looked at my son. This person I had watched grow from a small boy who invented a nickname for me out of a bedtime story about a bear in the northern woods into a man who had held himself steady across a coffee table from someone trying methodically to dismantle the beginning of his future, and who had held himself so well that he had helped bring that person down. What you just described, I said. That recognition, that he chose a timing and a vulnerability and worked it with patience, that is not something that should have been obvious while you were inside it. These are not impulsive people. They don't rush. They identify a window, a separation, a retirement, a death, a moment when someone is rebuilding, and they build something real inside that window. They invest time. They invest attention. They make you feel like someone worth knowing. By the time the financial question arrives, you're already inside something that doesn't feel like a trap, because the thing they built to get you there was genuine. The fraud lives underneath it, out of sight, waiting. Owen was quiet. It still doesn't feel clean. It shouldn't. That's not a flaw in you. That's an accurate response to something that was genuinely constructed to be difficult to see. What should I hold on to then? The moment your gut told you something was wrong, you didn't bury it completely. You sat with it long enough for it to speak. And then at a dinner table with no plan and no script, you reached across to the one person you trusted and used the only signal you had. That's not a small thing, Owen. Most people don't do that. He looked at his coffee. Most people feel the wrongness, I said, and that they decide they're being paranoid. Or they don't want to ruin something they've been hoping for, or they're embarrassed that they almost fell for it, so they rationalize it and wait. And while they're waiting, the deadline arrives, and the wire goes through, and the account is empty. That is the actual ending of most stories like yours. 9 people in this case alone know what that ending feels like. And they have a better chance now because of the recording. Because of you. Because of 2 hours in a coffee shop where you held yourself together and gave 9 strangers the clearest evidence they were going to get. He didn't say anything for a while after that. Shirley came back, and the evening went soft the way evenings do when the hard part is behind you and the people you love are in the same room and no one needs to say anything in particular. At some point, Owen fell asleep in the armchair in the corner of the living room, shoes still on, head tipped to the side. Shirley put the blanket from the couch over him and turned off the floor lamp, and we sat there in the quiet of our own house watching our son sleep. I have something I want to say plainly, as someone who spent 2 decades studying how this kind of harm is done. Financial fraud of the kind Philippe Audet practiced does not work on careless people. It works on people who are open to connection, to the possibility that good things still happen, to the idea that someone might genuinely want good things for them. The most effective financial predators are not opportunists who strike randomly. They are patient. They read situations. They find windows of vulnerability, a transition, a loss, a fresh start, and they build something real inside those windows. Real conversation, real warmth, real time. The attention feels genuine because for a period it is genuine. The fraud is underneath all of it, present from the beginning, but invisible until someone outside the moment looks at the structure and names what they're seeing. There are specific things to look for. An investment return that sounds consistent but unusually high. In Canada, any private or exempt market investment claiming regular returns above 8 or 9% annually should prompt serious questions. A fund that cannot be verified through CDAR, the Investment Fund Manager Registry, or the Securities Commission of the province where it claims to operate. Any of the provincial securities commissions, OSC in Ontario, ASC in Alberta, BCSC in British Columbia, maintain public registries. They are free to search. They take 5 minutes. A business address that turns out to be a commercial mailbox service. An artificial deadline, a closing window, a limited allocation, an opportunity that expires. Reluctance to allow independent legal or financial review. Language that sounds like protection but specifies nothing. Reserve funds, security mechanisms, assurance programs that are named but have no defined administrator, no capitalization requirement, no regulatory oversight. If someone sends you a financial document, you can verify any registered advisor or dealing representative in Canada through the Canadian Securities Administrators National Registration Search at securitiesadministrators.ca. You can check for any filed offering memorandum or prospectus on CDAR at cdar.com. You can look up any registered investment fund manager through your provincial securities commission. These tools are public. They are free. Most people have never used them. Please use them. The 5 minutes they take may be the most important 5 minutes of a financial decision you ever make. And this, which I think is the most important thing I know how to say. If someone in your life reaches out to you, with a look, with a question, with a name they haven't used since they were a child, please listen. Owen had no plan when he sat at my table that Sunday evening. He had no speech. Something in him knew, before his conscious mind was ready to say it out loud, that he needed someone outside the situation to look at what was happening with different eyes. That knowing, that instinct, that willingness to reach for something, even in an imperfect and impulsive way, that is the thing that made everything else possible. Protect that in the people you love. Trust it in yourself. We didn't lose $1. We almost did. And the difference between those two outcomes at the end of all of it was a 32-year-old man sitting at a Sunday dinner table who used a name he hadn't said aloud in 23 years because some part of him knew the person across from him would hear it and understand what it meant. If something is speaking to you right now, it is not paranoia. It is not the damage from the last hard thing you went through. It is information. The only question is whether you will let yourself act on it.